and only John Philsell. There we are. To do community development and facilities.
Thank you all. I'm joined by Matthew Pratt, who has, in my absence over the last 8 or 9 weeks or so, done a lot of the hard graft to get us to where we are. So, yeah, thank you very much, Matt. Okay. What we'd like to do, as Peter said, provide a brief overview, and particularly encourage after that elected members to ask any questions. If we don't know the answers or the information's not readily available, we'll note it and get back to you as soon as we can through the agreed channels. So the community development and facilities, very, very broad. What does this activity deliver? Delivers strengthening communities together. Active and connected communities owning their own future. That's the statement and the vision of the Strengthening Communities Together strategy, which guides a lot of what we aim to achieve. So this activity works within communities. It connects those communities to council. It connects council to communities. It connects council to council, how we work internally. It connects communities to each other and a host of other organisations wanting to help. So if you like, this activity is the glue, it's the oil, it enables, it navigates. And following on from that, often it's better if this activity and we do not hit the headlines. So the activity, for example, supports a very effective volunteer graffiti management service. They are the people that need to hit the headlines, celebrate what they're doing, communities working on behalf of the communities, not the council working behind enabling this to happen. This activity works in communities. It asks what communities want and need. It connects with elected members, and elected members determine the priorities, and the activity works through the whole of council and with, as I said, a host of other organisations together with communities to deliver. So the elected member priorities should be very, very familiar, and Matthew and I have just listed some. Planning within communities to prepare for, respond to, and recover from adverse events. Most recently, these have been weather events. We've had fires, earthquakes. We've had dreadful attacks on our communities. Priorities include community board plans, very comprehensive, very local, very targeted. Priorities include accessibility, championed by Councillor Kewen, city safety, through you, Phil, the youth, the Jake, Andre Yanni, the multicultural, Tyler, climate change, Sarah, and everyone else, you know, and this is often at the sharp end. These are the adverse events that are affecting our communities, and volunteers. We can't do this without them. So a very, very brief snapshot of examples of what the activity delivers. The over 200 community and non-government organisations supported, provided advice, collected information, fed back to community elected members. Community board plans developed promptly at the earliest possible time to inform the development of an LTP. So local priorities being strategic document informing this process. They were completed by boards in early May, and they've been used copiously. This activity supported council's multi-agency and community response to 4 weather events in 2022. We've supported numerous community-based initiatives to build resilience, from response plans. Stan's got a plan. The most recent of those, incidentally, was in Akaroa on Saturday, when the team went over there and met with a wide range of community folks concerned with, the deluge of wet weather events. How do we build resilience, response, planning in our community? We coordinate, facilitate local community networks and meetings. We do the same with metropolitan sector-based networks. We support recreation events, programs, activities, engagement, capacity building, and ultimately sustainability. Probably the bigger ones you've heard about, culture galore. Events like that, they run through this activity. We look after community grants and funding. That's a huge business of council. One of the changes here is we are progressively aggregating all of council's grants and contributions into one activity, so it can be cared for, managed, reported, and communicated to and from elected members, so it's most efficient. We received over 200 applications for community grants. And out of those applications, the elected members, both at a council and a board level, they approved 1,300 grants. Yeah, great, you've approved some grants. Here's a good one. From those grants, in the Strengthening Communities Fund, they generated more than 3 million volunteer hours per annum. Volunteer hours is very crude, but it's one of the best measurements we've got. If you translate that into living wage, it's $78 million. But I bet your bottom dollar, a committed volunteer with passion is more valuable than living wage. Incidentally, that's also 1,448 full-time equivalents. So that's a huge volunteer workforce being motivated by a small part of what you do as elected members. We are the custodians for a diverse network of 80 community facilities, approximately 100 buildings, worth approximately 100 million across Christchurch and Banks Peninsula, 3/4 of which are managed in partnership with communities. So we are strengthening communities. We are building capacity through these facilities, through the operation. Graffiti, little old graffiti. They receive over 17,000 reports of tagging. They work with volunteers to deliver nearly 13,000 hours. So it was last year, of volunteer help. $4.4 million worth for an accountant. And again, the success is not just removing tagging, it's those 135 individuals, 50 groups going out, motivating, caring for their community, interacting, building social capital.
And an award-winning service as well.
And award-winning, yes. Thank you, Dawn. They win the award, we don't. They're passionate about it, we are too, you can probably tell. So look, there are some changes to previous activity management plans, and I'd just like to go through briefly. This activity reflects ongoing community, council, and community board priorities derived from community research. So you will see broad brush, less quake recovery, less rebuilds, less COVID recovery. You will see far more planning to prepare for, respond to, and recover from adverse events, the hard end of climate change. You will see less area planning, centre planning, strategy. We've done a lot of that. You'll see more implementation. What's driving these changes? And these are really high-level changes. I said before, you'll see greater aggregation of funding. What's driving this? Look, mainly 90% the community, the council, and community board priorities. This reflects your priorities, and if it doesn't, this is the forum to say, ooh, hang on, correction. New Zealand's approach to emergency management and climate change are driving this. We are being expected to do more. We can't do it alone. We have to do it with our communities. Our communities have to be prepared and engaged and feel less vulnerable. We've seen this from Auckland. We've seen this from Coromandel, Gisborne. We've seen this a number of times in Westport. And we're now seeing it in Hawaii. It's across the Pacific, but it's a neighbor. What's driving this? We've done the planning, we've done the strategy, we're now into the doing, getting out there and delivering. What's also driving this is greater collaboration within the council organisation itself, within external organisations, and within our communities. Probably have to say that, you know, sometimes this can be difficult and this can be distressing for some. Some of the issues that we're working through, just for example, Marylands, we have reserves and roads named after Marylands, and to people that have suffered, it's very, very distressing. It's distressing for the board. So we are working with different parts of the council, different parts of the community, elected members, to find a solution. Brooklands, a community that rightly or wrongly feel a bit abandoned through the wider response to the quake. So getting in there, how can we assist? What can we do at a street level, a local level? So it's challenging. On the other hand, it can be very positive and very affirming. March the 15th, unbelievable tragedy. Where are we now? Next March, we will open a fantastic multicultural centre, the best building on the best park in the world. This is not a warehouse in a suburb. This is left, right, and centre. So it's not all gloom and doom.
That's good.
Are there any increases or decreases in service, and what are the impacts this is likely to have? There's absolutely no change to the quantum of what we do, the amount, or the cost in the current LTP. Why? Because, look, you've reprioritised, you've told us your priorities, and we've cascaded them in. Yes, you will see money moving around. It's existing money. There are some impacts of keeping the quantum and the budgets the same as in the LTP, the existing LTP. There is greater and I'll talk to two, if I may. I'm sure others will be raised. There's greater competition for contestable funding. We've seen more organisations apply for more. Council are seen as I won't say last resort, but in some cases a last resort. Often when organisations are struggling in established revenues, they will come to us because we are in a wonderful position to have these contestable funds. Not many others do. So what are we doing? We are providing more robust information to elected members to support decisions. And at times we are having difficult conversations. We're prioritising and trying to give you guys, whether you sit on council or boards, better information. The funding you've got has the best result. Another impact, we continually manage, I would say, an ageing community facilities portfolio. We know we have a huge range of facilities in the city. We know we've got about 100 buildings. We continue to support target investment. So the facilities we want to develop and encourage, we go for it. We also act on council's resolutions to dispose of facilities surplus to requirement. And we manage the decline of facilities at the end of their life. Example might be O'Kane's Bay Community Centre. It's just about at the high tide mark. It's at the end of its life. The Runanga are saying, look, you probably don't need it, and we'd like to be included in any future developments. We're not putting any effort and energy into preserving that facility's life. So there are a number of compromises by not increasing the budget. If you look at our asset plan, there is a significant significant difference between the cost of maintaining all our assets at complete fit for purpose level and the resources we put in. The gap is the managed decline, it's the disposal, but also the cost, the commitment is the targeted investment. So this plan does have some compromises. Are there capital and operational implications of any of the above? Well, at this stage, we've proposed no increase to CapEx or OpEx, but that comes with some caveats. We need to, continue to prioritize and in some cases make some tough decisions. You will see differences in figures, but these are usually the result of aggregating budgets that already exist through the organization and putting them in one place where they can be nurtured and loved. Risks and challenges, yep. These are a few of the bigger ones. Look, there's an increasing frequency and severity of adverse events. Been having a lot of floods. God forbid we don't want a tsunami. Fire is also an increasing worry. We're getting drier in the summer. There's an increased perception of vulnerability within communities, mainly as a result of these adverse effects, but we do see it a lot in city safety and a wee bit in crime. There's a greater responsibility passed on to territorial local authorities by everyone, and we need to prioritise for that. There's a greater dependence on council for operational sustainability for a whole raft of community organisations, and we're picking that up. There's greater pressure on volunteers. They're becoming more precious. They're becoming less available. People are busy. They've got other things to do. What are we doing about this? Well, we are prioritising more emphasis into supporting communities in dealing with adverse events, working with communities to give them assurance that they're not alone, help them plan, make them feel more confident. Operational sustainability for community organisations. We've already talked about our approach to funding. Pressure on volunteers, nurture them, love them, support them. Probably the last risk and challenge, we are increasingly concerned with aggressive behaviour and abuse targeted at elected members. We see it in boards, we see it with you, staff, ourselves, and our volunteers. And we're working with the organisation on some strategies to mainly awareness to deal with that. Okay, I've probably said enough. But Matt and I are happy to accept and answer any questions we can. Thank you.
Righto, Yanni and Celeste.
Thank you. A few things to start with. One is I'm increasingly concerned and probably highly embarrassed of the lack of maintenance of our facilities. So if you come to our community board room, you'll see that it's overgrown with weeds, covered in dust. It's quite embarrassing for people to go there. Where do we fix that sort of thing? Like, is that a city care not getting out of the car, just going past saying it's okay? Or is it like a contract issue? Or is it a budget issue that we need to fix through here?
Yanni, I'll start and back Martin. I would say it's a combination of all. Generally the structure and the appearance of a facility, the maintenance is ours. And it can be us not managing a contractor well enough, contractor not being able to, or not dealing with everything. Sometimes it can be a budget issue. It's easier to answer that on a more individual basis. So it's usually a combination of all. We feel that if we keep in the trajectory we're going, we will have just enough to manage what we need to. Not every facility will be perfect. It won't be tip top. It won't be managed as well as this room, but we do have to make compromises. Matt, did you?
Yeah, I think the reality is
we do have to look at more strategic look at it.
Yeah,
not
yeah,
so
so
much weeds and
strategically,
dust, which is
But I don't understand why the facilities in the east look so terrible and other facilities in other parts of the city look really nice. And to me, it doesn't really make any sense. But I just really, if it's a budget thing, because I know in the past we've made budget decisions around the frequency, and you've got, if you look in the asset management plan, you've got a whole bunch of detailed about the life cycle of when we do maintenance. So I'm really trying to understand is if we wanted those facilities to be well maintained, to look to a decent standard, it's a front-facing part of the council in New Brighton, then do we need to add additional budget or additional level of service to ensure that it happens? Waiting a year for maintenance to get done, or just under a year, is embarrassing.
Yanni, from what I've said in the plan, the answer would be yes. If you want an
Okay.
increased level of service,
Thank you,
it's
John.
going to cost more.
The second question I had was around
For you, Phil, sorry, pardon me.
community house. Is that under this policy? Because I didn't see it listed on the facilities. I may have missed it, but
Yeah.
given that we've
That's Litchfield.
bought it,
Yep.
is there kind of a reference to it or what we're doing?
It's in the, it won't, through you, Phil, at Community House, we haven't listed every facility in here, but it's part of this network.
Did Matt have some input into Yanni's question at all? Oh, sorry, I butted in front of you.
no. John's answer, yes.
Okay,
is
cool.
correct.
Thank you. Okay.
So can I ask then, like with community house, do we need a special sort of activity management plan for that in terms of how we fund it, how we operate it?
No, I think what we've got is fine at the moment.
Okay.
So there's a commercial rent they pay. We're maintaining it. There's an asset plan for it.
Great. Thank you.
Can I just, sorry to, when we kind of make general comments like how embarrassed we are about our facilities, there are 100 facilities. Some may not be perfect, and I agree with you, Yanni, that some do need to be reviewed or whatever. But if we make those statements out in the public, I'm really getting sick of going to the public and hearing them saying, "Oh, the council's doing a shit job." We've got to be careful about how we portray ourselves and the organisation out there. So can we just, I do absolutely sympathise with the facility you're talking about, absolutely, and it needs to be looked at. But let's just be not generalise and just put down the organisation and their staff and ourselves.
Thank you.
So I was trying to understand. I was embarrassed. Have you been to the boardroom?
But we've got 100 facilities. Are you embarrassed with all of
What
them?
boardrooms do we have?
We've got 7. 8.
Right.
No,
Thank
I'm
you,
just
guys.
saying, let's lift our game up a wee bit.
Okay. Thank you. We'll just lift. Yeah. Celeste, please. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Celeste.
Um,
That means you're going to punish us with questions, doesn't it, through you, Phil? Yeah.
I just have a question around the emergency management side of things. Can you just expand a little bit further around, the planning side of that from the council side? Because I know that communities are doing some work in that space in terms of working, around what the plan will be. But my understanding is we don't actually have a plan in terms of tsunami evacuation. And the other part of the question would be around the resourcing around that might be required. Because I have had an initial look at that, and it seems like we're sort of a little bit perhaps there's some work to be done in that space. So it'd be great if we could sort of prioritize that through the long-term plan.
Through you, Phil. Celeste, that's a great question, and we'll be covering that in detail. That's actually contained in a separate activity plan. The emergency management and community resilience we're presenting that in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and we'll cover those points. What you are seeing here is a lot of interplay between the two. So you will see a lot of emphasis on community here, and when we discuss civil defence and emergency management, we'll answer your questions in detail, and you'll see the other half of the coin, the planning. So good question. We'll keep it in mind.
Great. And the other thing is more of a request for information. I know that we're getting a briefing at some point soon, but do you have an update on the timing for when we're going to get some information around the city safety bit of work that's being done? Does that fall under your...
Yes, it is. Can we note that as a question and come back?
That's great.
Definitive time frame.
Couple of weeks.
A couple of weeks. Great. Thank you.
And one thing I also I was out there with John, and Mark was there last night as well with the Civil Defence Emergency Group. You talk about volunteers. I've never seen such a happy, proud group of people in my life. It was a pleasure to be there. So that it's in very good hands. Tyler.
I'll let Sarah go. She probably does a better job than me. I'll go up to her. That's right.
Okay, well, I think we were going to share some questions. So, so start sort of, I guess, in the earlier pieces. So on page 19 of our agenda, as opposed to the slide pack, it's got the high impact issues and mitigations planned. For equity and access, the high impact issue is increased pressure on community funding, and the mitigating thing is to fund it differently. It doesn't seem like an appropriate thing for equity and access when other things, their key risks aren't funding. And I'm just trying to work out how and why that one was framed as a funding issue, where other ones weren't. So technology growth isn't a funding issue, it's something different.
Would you like to have a crack at that?
Yeah, so there's a...
So do we want to get other people to fund equity and inclusion rather than us? Was how it read.
So there was a briefing the other day around the equity and access policy, which is being developed at the moment, which will inform some of this thinking. That lots of the equity conversations that we're having, and some of the access conversations as well, there are smarter ways to do things, which I guess is why this is we've looked at the funding issue here, and some of it is around capacity and capability of us and the sector to do things. I guess we were framing it that way in this one. It's not a catch-all or everything.
Yeah, it's just that with most of the things that we do, funding is a restriction or a barrier to trying to do more. And for this one, it was kind of called out, but where it wasn't necessarily for the others.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if there's other things that are in there that are issues for equity and access.
I think the thinking, I think the thinking behind this one was around accessibility to lots of the facilities. So not all of our facilities are accessible or as accessible as they should be or could be.
But that's something that should be for us to fund, not necessarily for others, yeah?
Yeah.
So if we could maybe work on some of that wording, I think it's... Yeah. So we should be making sure our facilities are accessible. Yeah.
I think what we're hearing through you, Phil, is there are a number of equity and access issues. We've looked at funding here. Let's have a look at other particularly relevant ones.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
So page 25 on the agenda, there's the resources needed slide, and I think it's on a slide there somewhere too, with the sort of budget lines. But I did notice, and I checked with you earlier, and I know you've got an answer for this one.
Heads up.
Is that the very first two budget lines, they leap in annual plan 23-24 from 11 million to, in the long-term plan, 28 million. So a massive jump in 1 year. And I know that you've got an answer for that big jump in that community grant funding allocation and loans.
Yeah. Through you, Phil, the reason for the increase is, as I mentioned earlier on, we are aggregating bits of grant funding from the organisation and putting it into a single activity, a single home. So this specifically relates to things like the museum funding, which was a little activity, a little endeavour on its own. It's now been brought into this activity, so it is not a net increase. It's just a better organisational layout, if you like.
Yeah. So one thing that, since I heard that just before we started, one thing that bothers me about that is when we are at a high level combining those things, what it looks like is that we do $28 million a year of community grants and loans.
Yep.
That's not the case. So the museum one, for example, is a legislated amount that we have to give.
Yep.
And I would prefer that those kind of things are separate, and that maybe an additional line there underneath that one for those. So that's not like a contestable pot. It's not something people apply. It's that kind of. Yeah. So I think any of those other ones, I think that would be good to have separately.
We've got 5 minutes to go, and I've got 2 more questions after you, because Tyler's one.
So the maintenance one.
I'll be quick.
So it's super clear from both page 22 when it looks at the fact that we have not enough budget for planned maintenance to maintain our facilities, and that leads to an increase in reactive maintenance. And from page 46, where it makes it clear that it's the highest residual risk in our facilities, and that the likelihood is that we would need to sell facilities to pay for maintenance of other facilities. What I would like to see us do is to get the costings. So currently it's all same as LTP. I would like the option presented to us where we can actually properly fund and maintain our facilities so that they are maintained to a high standard, so that we don't have the increased reactive maintenance, and that we're not at risk of having to sell others to because they haven't had enough maintenance. So I'd like those costings done for us, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't see it.
Yeah, through you, Phil.
Tyler, please.
Yep.
Well, thank you,
Um,
John.
just catching what you said around the capex and opex, and you've noted that you don't want to increase any of those. Are we keeping up with inflation with our community funds?
Depends what the budgets in the existing long-term plan are inflation adjusted. But spikes in in inflation and cost of living, probably not. I think that is probably better answered in a higher level by our financial people. I can say that there is an inflation provision across all of our community funding, and I can get back to you and say exactly what that is over the years. It is not the current rate of inflation at the moment.
Okay.
But we are not expecting the current rate of inflation at the moment to extend over the life of the LTP, I hope. But that's a question better answered by my financial colleagues than me.
So I'm checking in here and saying, is it essentially a funding cut going into the 24-25 financial year?
If you're asking me, no. But people are going to have different perspectives on that.
Okay. Last quick question is around equity and access. And I just wanted to, I saw a lot of the words here that were around partnerships and collaboration, but at the same time, our funding model is made to be contestable, which is quite the opposite. Would you consider or think about an alternative form of funding in a different pot, such as something like a collaboration fund, where other organizations partner with each other?
Yes. Yes, it's an option for, we have a funding pot. It's essentially you can cut it either way you wish. Yep. A number of the drivers behind council's funding decisions are based on collaboration already. So I would say that's a significant part of what we do.
Gotcha.
This activity does not support at the moment the creation of another fund. Yep. I think our contestable funds are wide in scope. Council make good decisions, better informed decisions. Yes, there's room for improvement.
So,
Go on.
so just to follow up with what John has just said, and if you go into the detail, many of our funds are match funding from other organisations across the board from many different places, and
absolutely.
that actually is one of the things that will get a tick in terms of supporting that mechanism going through. I'm not convinced splitting funds off is going to help you necessarily get that anymore, because it's an important part of the principle.
Okay. And lastly, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Just in terms of community facilities, there seems to be a wide range of ownership across the city. I mean, some are owned and run by community, like South Brighton Hub or Parklands, and then we have others like Aranui, which is run by us. And so there are places like the Roy Stokes Hall where that was built by the community and is now sort of transferred back to the responsibility of the community. Is that are we actively looking to give the community more control over their community facilities rather than stumping up with continual OPEX to tidy these places up and keep them running? Is there an active program to look at passing them to the community?
Do you want to hit that, or do you want
management or maintenance?
Well, management mostly, but maintenance comes with it, I guess.
There's the community facilities network plan looked at a kind of a spectrum of ownership where it's council owned and council maintained through to community owned, community maintained. Roy Stokes Hall, I believe, has always been a community facility, not a council owned asset, but that's a very good example of one. And there are other halls like that. Some St Albans is a new building that we've built, but is managed by the community. So we would still have some involvement in the maintenance of that. There are other halls in other parts of the city. Lansdowne Community Centre, for example, is been owned and managed, well, not owned by us, but managed by the community for years. So there's a definite conversation. Summerfield's another one which has come up recently. There's a definite conversation with community organisations to say, you're local, you use these, you activate them, you manage them. What that looks like in terms of partnership and who pays for what varies on historically what the agreement's been, and also some communities manage community facilities and don't get much income back in the way that they're activating them, and some do, and so there's always a conversation.
I guess the underlying premise, Councillor, is if everyone can play to their strengths, we get a better result. That sounds simple, but it's what we try to achieve.
Yeah, I wonder if we might want to encourage people to, or organisations to take responsibility in a much greater way, so that we don't have this kind of endless cycle of, people saying it's our responsibility all the time. That's all. Thanks.
Now, if we got any more questions, put them to the OCE, and John will end up with them. But Dawn has one final say.
It was just where you started off, John, in relation to the demand on council and a shift of being often the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And just your reflections, because clearly what we're trying to do is enable communities to actually strengthen and bring further resilience.
Build the fence at the top.
Build the fence at the top,
Very
exactly.
much.
And I think it's important to get across to members how you see that in the next few years, in light of the fact that we are dealing with a lot of demand where people are at the end of their journeys and therefore coming to council as the last resort, and how we enable that shift to happen. Otherwise, we will always be in a position of actually funding at the end of the game, not enabling further resilience.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll have a break until 10:30 on the dot. And Lynette, our place? Far away, mate.
Thanks. Kia ora koutou. It's nice to be here this morning. It's a nice day out there. So I'm talking to you this morning about the transport activity plan. And as you're all aware, we've also got solid waste in our portfolio. That is another activity plan that will come to you at a later date. Look, my first slide is one you've seen before. And this is the slide that, I don't know what's got a 0.0 on it, but anyway, it has. This is the slide that you saw the other day at a strategic transport briefing. And this, just to remind you a little bit of the context at which the transport program sits within the national context. So our long-term plan and our activity plan sits within and informs the regional land transport plan, the RLTP. We have acronyms for Africa, so I'll try and avoid them. That is part of and informs the National Land Transport Program, or the NLTP. And that program is informed by the government policy statement for land transport, the GPS. That's one acronym we probably can't get away from. The GPS has been delayed with recent changes, ministerial changes. It could come after the election. The noise is that it could come later this month. So that then gives us our priorities for how we're working. Look, at a broad overview, the transport program sits about $120, $130 million worth of capex each year, and about a similar amount in operational expenditure. So it's a big program sitting in this, and we leverage a lot of funding out of this program of work in this subsidy stream. So our goal is to ensure we're aligned as we can be, so that we make the best that we can of those funding streams. Our broad program, again, those of you that were here for the last LTP, but probably most councillors have heard us talk about the 3 pillars that we run under transport, of safety, environment and access. So if a project doesn't fit within one of those pillars in alignment, then really why are we doing it? That's really what it is. Those pillars also align quite nicely with, historically, with the GPS and into road safety actions, the actions of looking after the assets that we've got, and the environmental initiatives that we have. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail, but just for context, we'll try and repeat this as much as we can. I am going to scoot through to a couple of slides into what services do we provide. And this is a really good slide to just show you a snapshot of what we provide. All of the numbers aren't quite on there yet, but we try and reseal about 80 kilometres of road a year, 30 to 40 kilometres of footpath. We fix in the order of 10,000 potholes every year. About 20% of those are actually reported to us. So about 2,000 are reported to us. 8,000 of those are picked up by the contractor and are just fixed. We remove a lot of graffiti. So we have the graffiti contract for graffiti removal. We sweep almost 40,000 kilometres of roads and gutters. We have talked recently about temporary traffic management, but we have responsibility for signing off requests. They come through at about 100 a week, so it's about 5,000 a year. Those are just the approvals that we have to sign off, as opposed to all of the work that's happening out there on the network under generic approvals that are already signed off. We do journey planning with businesses and with schools. We've got at least 50 schools involved. We deliver road safety education programs. Crash Bash is delivered to 27 high schools. There is also the motorcycle safety campaign that's run in the, the name of it's just skipped my mind. But we also delivered cycle safety to over 3,500 students last year across the city. Yeah. Oh, and to you, and a number of adults as well. So there you go. Our capital program, as I said before, is in the order of 125, 130 million, and our operational budgets sitting at about 100 to 110. Resource consenting. We also provide resource consenting advice. So we provide transport advice to form resource consents for subdivisions and other developments out there. So we were involved in 134 related resource consents in the last 12 months. So there's a significant amount of work and service work go through the unit. The other thing to think about, and some of you may have seen this before, but last year and I have to double check the numbers, but our residents travelled and used the transport network for a total of 2.2 billion kilometres of vehicle travel, which is, think of it, if my facts remind me correctly, is something in the order of to Saturn and back. So that's a big trip. So the other part of this is the assets that we maintain. So while we had all these services we provide, these are the assets that we maintain. 2,500 odd kilometres of road, of which about 350 kilometres of that is gravel. 3,500 kilometres of curb and channel, and 34,000 sumps. I'm not going to read through all of these numbers, but the first three up there, the drainage structures, the carriageway details, and the road structures are the ones that are key to the future of this, to the rest of this discussion. 409 bridges. Many of those are over on the peninsula and are single span bridges, very small. Some very big bridges, like in the twin bridges in Fitzgerald Ave, Ferrymead Bridge, Pages Road Bridge, and others across the Avon that we've got. 1,800 retaining walls. Those sit not just in the peninsula, but also on the city side of the Port Hills largely. Those are the ones we are aware of at the moment. Our asset base and knowledge has improved vastly over the last 3 years, but we are always finding more. So for example, when Sumner Road was renewed and we increased that, we did the work along Sumner Road, some of those retaining walls, the scope of those retaining walls increased by about 200%, because once we cleared the debris off in front of them, we realised the walls were a lot bigger than we knew about. So we've got signs, we've got bus and tram shelters, we've got bus priority lanes, we've got parking meters, we've got traffic signals, controllers, cabinets, lots of electrical equipment, street lights and street poles, almost 40,000 street lights at the moment. The other one that's a big one in there is our road landscaping. 63,000 trees that are street trees and classified as street trees. So it's a significant part of the work to create the urban forest. The street and road network has a significant role in achieving that. 970 hectares of landscape sites. That is just the road landscapes. So it's a lot of road landscapes to be maintaining. So replacement cost is something in the order of 4.6 billion. If you break that down to a yearly rate, we're talking about 70 million, and it's increasing as we go. Now, the thing I would like to highlight in this is that's a snapshot of our assets as of now. This will be updated again for the final LTP, but it increases all the time. So each year we have more road network and all of those associated assets vested in our ownership through subdivision. Some years it's 10, 15 kilometres. Other years it could be 70 or 80 kilometres, and that's vested in our network every year. The other thing we have is that we have an increasing length in our network when we have revocations from state highway. And we have an increasing number of those with the changes to the motorway network. So this is all, I'll get into a bit more detail on this coming up. The other thing around road landscapes is that we've got an increasing amount of road landscapes to support some of the Wakakotahi areas. So those motorway areas, we are taking on the responsibility for the landscaping. Anyway, that's a discussion to come up. So that's the services we provide and the assets we've got, to give you a good picture. Now, I'm going to flick through again. This is a bit of a picture on what our communities are saying over the years. Look, the things we tend to report pretty well on is a perception that we're either walking friendly or cycling friendly. The perception of being walking friendly has been declining over time. I'd say cycling friendly staying fairly steady state. We've historically not scored highly on satisfaction with footpath condition, and that has been showing a moderate decline there over time, and satisfaction with road condition. However, that satisfaction picture there is looking fairly steady state. We haven't dropped or risen much at all. It's pretty much people are not happy. And that's an ongoing challenge that we have in the resident satisfaction survey. So we're working hard with the monitoring and research team to dig into that a lot more and provide you more information as we move forward. Excuse me a second. I'm going to skip forward to, there's lots of words on these slides. This one. So the structure I talked about was these 3 pillars that are underpinned by the affordability, foundation of affordability and deliverability. Let's put that both in the same sentence. The 3 pillars of safety, environment and access is fairly steady state from the significant change we undertook last LTP, where we combined a number of activity plans into one. That's the feedback that we had on that change was really positive from Wakakotahi. They felt it helped our alignment with national strategies. They understood the documentation. They were really chuffed to see it. So we want to build on that and get better at explaining that and telling the story of what Christchurch City is trying to achieve with our transport program through those 3 pillars. In looking at these issues at the moment, we are undertaking a number of visits with the local runanga to clearly understand their priorities. We've got the community board priorities that have come through or are coming through, and we're working through our program and how do they fit in and what are we focusing on, what isn't in there, so that we can be really clear about that through the program. The climate change and adaptation and resilience is a key focus for us. So I'll come to that a bit more. But our big one is what can we do that we can measure and actually really start making some moves on. All of this, our pillars, our program, we are trying to tie together both with the IS. Key focus for us is looking after what we've got, looking after it well, so that we keep our unplanned costs down, and tying it together with the conversations that we are having with you around the building of the Christchurch transport plan, the strategic work that's going on at the moment. So we're trying to make sure we line all this up for you so that you can see these pictures and understand what we're trying to achieve in the network. I'm going to, the next picture I'm going to stop on is this one, which is incredibly small. I can barely read it on the computer. Incredibly small, but these are our levels of service in a one-pager, if you like. The order that they go across the page is access, environment and safety. And we have, again, chosen to be steady state on our levels of service and there are no radical changes. I think there will be tweaks and shifts in some of the measures and maybe what we want to achieve under those, but we're still going to want to stick with those high level levels of service. We have a number of mandatory levels of service. In fact, we have 5 mandatory levels of service. One is around safety, and that is reducing deaths and serious injury crashes on our network. So that is required. So the mandatory is set by the Department of Internal Affairs. Another one is relates to condition, and particularly the condition of the carriageway. So there is a smooth travel exposure measure that we have to put in. That typically that measure is impacted by the smooth travel exposure on your arterial routes. So it's the routes that are used heavily with large numbers of traffic. It doesn't impact local roads to the same degree because it's based on volume. There's also a resurfacing level of service. Apologies. We also have a condition level of service for our footpaths, as in a certain amount of our footpath is resurfaced. And then the final one is around service requests and meeting our service request requirements. So they're the 5 mandatory measures that we have under levels of service. The rest of them that we've put in there are trying to help us all tell a story of how we're meeting the initiatives that we have as an organisation and you have as an organisation. But again, like I said, we're trying to stay steady state on them and keep moving forward and start building that that story of progress. I am going to flick right to the end of the last 2 slides at the moment. These really talk to the key challenges that we're trying to manage through this process and through the development of the long-term plan. From a transport perspective, I talked before about the length of our network, the number of retaining walls we have, the length of our footpath network, and the key goal in the IS around looking after what we have, really looking after it well so that we minimise unplanned unplanned costs, and we maximise our planned costs so that we can keep moving. And as I said before, we've got an ever increasing network, so it's increasing incrementally each year, both with subdivisions and revocations. But we've also got an increasing demand, and an increasing demand on our staff and our network to do more. So the number of requests for service tickets that we get, we sit up there in the top unit, at the top of the pile, if you like. That went up from 45,000 the previous year to 60,000 last year. So more and more requests for service and more expectation that everything is done. So more and more push on that dollar that we had. Now that dollar that we have to spend, last year, $100, this year will cost us $125. That's sort of the order of what we're looking at. The Waka Kotahi indices that we've managed to get a hold of, that we're working with the finance guys on this, shows a 28% increase in the last 12 months. And the increase on some items is anywhere between 10% and 40% on particular items. So cost increases that we're facing and what we're doing is high. We've got the cost challenge is high. We've got an increasing network. So we are working really hard at the moment, and we don't have all the answers quite yet, but we're working on that through this process to figure out how we make things go further, how we manage the network better, and the assets that we have, and how we get more. So manage well what we have with the dollars that we do have. So what does that mean and what does that look like? So what will be coming back to you over this process is through both the future conversations about capital and OPEX is, right, we've got this, and we can do this, or we can do this, but these are the implications. So we will give you those scenarios as much as we can. We're ever evolving. There's a lot of technology changes that we're working on, a lot of material changes and technology to support those material changes that we're working on, trying to adapt for. Look, it's not all doom and gloom. I did read something the other day, I think Helen sent it through to me, that in the OECD, New Zealand is investing in its transport infrastructure. It is up there as the best investor over time in their transport infrastructure. So we are increasing that investment, but we are seeing an ongoing challenge, particularly with the maintenance of the existing assets. So that's a double-barrel challenge. So that affordability piece is our first big challenge. So I've got 3 challenges that I'm trying to focus on through this LTP to try and focus our discussions of it. Hopefully that helps everyone. That affordability piece is the first one. That always aligns with deliverability. Come back to that in a minute. Resilience is the second one. So climate change and resilience, but we are really looking at a resilience piece. These are really small numbers, but all those bubbles on that little graph of the peninsula show the number of requests for service as a result of storm events that we've had since 2021. And something like 2,500 just on the peninsula. It seems that we are starting to have a significant rain event. In the last 2 years, we've had a significant rain event in July and a significant rain event in December, nicely 6 months apart, which is really lovely spaced out. But right at the beginning of the financial year and just before it, and some of those have been really significant, and we've had really substantial projects as a result of it. You went through you, Phil, though, you went out to Goffs Bay and you saw a lot of that in the significant work that was done out there. We've got Whakateras, which is still on lights because we've got a massive slip there that we're struggling to find a solution for. It is stable at the moment, but we are working on it. There is a number around the city, but every storm event, there are a number of very small to very large, could be small to large things happen on the network. Now, Waka Kotahi support us really well through that process, and they do support us to achieve and get the roads and the networks up and open again. But what we want to try and build, and this is the challenge that we've got through this, so if you go back to that stat about the retaining walls, we've got 1,800 retaining walls that we know of. We've got behind in the renewal of those. So to bring that forward, we need to up the amount of money we're putting into the program to just get those renewals going. But we need some form of a program that's going to be nimble so that we can respond to events. And how do we do that? The other thing we're looking at, and we are doing, is working with the Coastal Hazard Adaptation Program. So we are working through with them. We're embedded in those teams, but we're also looking at materials and different construction methodologies that we can use that mean that when an event happens or a road is inundated and the waters go away again, the road is not compromised. So that's, Steve is looking at that a lot at the moment. So there's a lot of that going on, and we're trying to build this into this program. We're trying to do about 25 things at once at the moment, so it feels a bit chaotic, but we do have a plan, and we are working on this. So we will keep trying to talk to you through this. So this is our second priority, is how do we build resilience into what we've got? So when the rain stops, the waters recede, we're still sitting, our road network's still sitting there, and our residents have access again. And the final one, I haven't got a slide. The final priority from my point of view is how do we, and I haven't got a slide for it, sorry, is how do we build and fit in with the national initiatives that are going on at through any particular 3-year period. So as we all know, change is disruptive. And in the last 3-year period, every year we've had some different initiative come through that has actually fundamentally disrupted our transport program. So we're on in an exercise at the moment where we're trying to figure out how do we structure our team and build our program so that we can be a bit more, I'm going to use nimble rather than flexible, because I think it's a better, we need to be able to jump sometimes, but we need to be able to have conversations with you about where do we go and how do we, what do we go for. That disruption of that change is disruptive to our staff. You know, they're on a track and then they're shifted. It's disruptive to our community because they have expectations on what they thought was going to happen, and then things change and they don't necessarily understand why. But it's also disruptive to our supply market. So we don't get good runs on construction, getting things delivered, changing the ways of working, that sort of thing. I sort of use the phrase consistency as a bit of comfort. So if we can be consistent and keep working, then we'll get comfort, and they'll have comfort in us as well. We'll get better prices, we'll get better working with them. But we do have a number of initiatives that are coming, and there's some really positive stuff that we've already built in. The big one is PT Futures. So we have already built into the start of our program what is planned for PT Futures, or at least the space to do it in the dollar in the budget. So the 78 million that the government are talking to. That is a big piece of externally funded work that is coming into the future for us. The other one we've got to do and build is our VKT reduction program, or our emissions reduction program. So that is still, I haven't got specifics I can put fingers on right now, but by the end of this LTP process we will, and we'll all understand it. But we're working on that, or we'll understand how we can fit it into our program. But as I said before, our focus for the team is how do we do more with what we have. So that's making sure any improvement projects that we're running are also looking at what renewals need to happen. We're getting everything done at once. So I think I've heard it around the table many times from many of you, let's do it once and do it right. That is our focus. It doesn't mean we'll get it right all the time, and it doesn't mean someone won't come behind us and say, I need to get into that road space, because we need to remember that road corridor, and the bit you see is just the icing on the cake. Underneath is the valuable real estate, which is the area for all the services. And we're working with all the service authorities and our utility providers to ensure that we're doing that as best we can. But the conversation around deliverability is difficult when you take the picture of the asset renewals, and this is how I'm proposing to chunk it up for the conversations with you, is the asset renewals and the different deliverability focus, the different levels at which we could undertake that. Then we've got a chunk of external funding that we've already got in our program. So this is a deliverability discussion. And we've got a thin sliver on top where we've got room to move. So it's a challenging conversation. And that is not just capital, that is also OPEX. Remember, we have as much OPEX expenditure as we have capital. So from my point of view, that's about the end of my starting point. 3 priorities to summarise from transport are, let's look after what we've got, which is an increasing network. Let's be more nimble and resilient so that we can, when the floodwaters recede or the rain stop, everybody's got access as soon as possible. And how do we manage these national initiatives?
Okay, right, questions. I'll just have one quick one. Thank you, Lynette, that was very good. Just one question, is there likely to be a tightening, and you might not be able to answer it, a tightening of Waka Kotahi money because they'll be firing it into Hawke's Bay or Cyclone Gabrielle area? Because there's only so much to go around. Do you think that's going to have a bearing on what we're hoping to do?
So a bit of context, if that's all right, to start with. So the Waka Kotahi money is funded, we have continuous programs. So that we call our maintenance ops renewals, the stuff that will go on every year. At the beginning of a 3-year period, we will get an indication of the chunk that we got. In the last 3-year period, we got 207 million over that 3-year period for our maintenance, operations, renewals, low cost, and our low cost, low risk program. So we don't have to go through the big business case process to get that. The work program, and then all of the improvement works, which are the major projects, anything over 2 million, 5 million, there you go, anything over 5 million, has to go through a bit of a business case process, depending on the size, depends on how big that is. That's all divvied up into work categories as well. So cycling and walking, PT, these other ones, and I can't div them off the top of my head. It's likely, and we are starting to see the pinch, and Waka Kotahi are starting to see the pinch on dollars just generally. There has been less income for the organisation over the last 12, 18 months. They are, their own programs are challenged in what they can deliver. They are facing the same cost challenges that we are facing. I mean, the indices that I put forward before showing 28% increase over 12 months is massive. So again, it's costing them more to do the same amount. So yes, I think we're going to see push, but they are indicating that we may stay the same, as in the numbers in those work categories could stay the same. I don't know what they'll look like when they come out, but we'll have to see that when it comes. The GPS will give us an indication of that.
Thank you.
And what the priority is.
Yep. Tyler.
Does it work? I don't think I've got a couple of quick ones. The first one, can you talk about steady state and what that means? Is there a slight increase over over your plan, or is it going to stay as is?
I think steady state mainly sticking with the main improvements that we had. Because the cost challenges are making it harder to do that. So the levels of service.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
So, sorry, I'll repeat that. Steady state is more around sticking with the improvements that we were expecting. So in relation to levels of service, our safety level of service has an increasing decline. Is that a double negative? A continuing decline in the number of deaths and serious injuries that we see on a network, and we're sticking with that measure at this stage. It's all out there for discussion. I think the challenges that we're facing mean in order to achieve that is pretty big achievements.
I see. And when you're talking about in terms of reactive versus proactive maintenance, is there going to be an internal change in there, or is there going to be some more budget required?
We are internal reactive versus proactive maintenance. So reactive versus planned maintenance. The planned maintenance is we're going to present you with the reality of what that looks like. If there isn't a budget increase, we won't be able to probably meet the levels of service we've got. However, we've got to work through that and the detail of that, and we haven't quite got there yet. I've tried to give you an indication of the challenge we're facing. $100 to do $100 work last year will cost us $125 this year is what we're looking at. So we have to figure out where the best place to put that. If we're going to do additional funding, there might be consolidation of funding that we can do as well. There may be some contractual levels of service we can step back on. So we're looking through all of that at the moment, and we want to try and give you we will try and give you options around that conversation, but I haven't got it there today yet.
No, that's all right. I'm just wanting to note that there's two so far that have said we don't really want a huge budget increase, and I was quite interested to hear that because it sort of flagged in my head, especially with the 28% increase in levels of service. And just to note for the public that there's 60,000 council service requests and 2,000 emergency ones around the peninsula. Is that correct, Lynette?
About 2,500 in the last 3 rain events.
Great. And this is arguably one of the most scrutinised units in
Yes.
council comings and goings.
You could argue that, yes.
Okay, this is just public knowledge. I'm just noting that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Through the chair, I'd just like to say we are working really hard. We understand that the drivers on finances and budgets and Wakakotahi are in the same boat, and we are working really hard to be as efficient and effective as we can. And we're looking at everything at the moment.
Sam?
Thanks, Lynette. That's a really good presentation. A couple of things. So the first one, I guess, is, and it's sort of a theme across all the activity plans, is what's changed in this one to help lift that resident satisfaction. So we hear it time and time again. What's going to move the dial from your team this time with our support to change that?
What's going to move the dial? That's a challenging terrible English, challenge. It's a challenging proposition because what we're working on is a number of things, but I think the big thing to try and move the dial is improve our communication of what we're doing and why we're doing it with the money that we've got. So there's a different piece of work to do that to move the dial. I think moving the dial and resident satisfaction is really difficult. And I touched on that when we talked about the fact that we are doing some work with the research and monitoring team to understand exactly what the issues are. So what we've started to do is get feedback from the resident satisfaction survey on exactly what residents' issues are, and then start trying to address them. Part of moving the dial is working and continuing to work with the footpath crews and improve that work that's going on out there. The other part of it will be the options that you get around the resurfacing program, the footpath resurfacing program, and the retaining wall program that you're getting. I think that is us starting to move the dial.
So I guess maybe I should put it sort of a different way. There's the back office stuff, but then there's the tangible stuff out in the community in terms of the resealings and stuff. And I looked at I think it was 2,400 kilometres.
Yep.
400 of which wasn't sealed, which is probably Tyrone's ward basically. And then at the other half we were doing about 80 kilometres of that, so sort of 4% for the year. So I guess, and it doesn't need an answer now. I guess what I'm saying
that's what we're looking at.
What I'd like to come back next time is what solutions the team have got, knowing that the resident satisfaction survey has repeatedly raised these concerns around moving that dial. I just think it's the point of an LTP is to kind of challenge the organisation. And it might be you come back and say, actually, we need another $30 million to do resealing, and we're going to have capacity within the contractors to do it.
That's what we're planning to come back to.
We just don't want to go through the status quo. And maybe I didn't ask the first question correctly. It's just, I'd like a bit more work done to give me a bit of confidence that we are looking at that.
Okay. Yeah.
Doesn't have to be now. Like take it away with you.
No. What I'm always about to say is that is what we're doing. Sorry, and I obviously haven't been clear enough. The programs that we're working on to try and change the dial. My concern is that shifting the dial on, particularly given the historic nature of what we've seen, shifting the dial is a long-term goal. Shifting the dial in 3 years will be a real challenge from with regard to resident satisfaction. If we can start seeing it coming up, then that'll be great. There's a multiple of back office stuff that we're doing, but the primary one in this LTP that we are working on is this resilience piece around how we can react to events, because that is something that is our resurfacing program, both in carriageways and footpaths, and that's you will come back with options on how that's what we're going to provide to you, and the retaining wall program. How do we shift that? Because there's a lot of retaining walls out there that just haven't been addressed for years and years, and that's causing issues.
So that those options when they come back, and maybe it's something you take offline, is just so they'll have the ability to go, we think if we do this will have an impact on resident satisfaction.
That's what we're having. That's what we will. Those are the options that we will bring back to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yes. And just the other one, and I know it's something Steve and I have talked about in the past, is around and you touched on it about the 200 million or 220 over the 3 years around maintenance and that kind of thing. How can we what do we need to do as a council to access more of the maintenance provisions from government in terms of resealing and that kind of stuff? Is it a capacity issue, or is it a government are tapped out in terms of resource?
It's a bit of both. What we have seen over the years is last year was the first year we tipped over 200.
Right.
So we've seen an increasing amount, and our last LTP was the first time we saw it tip over 200. We have leveraged increasing amounts of that, an increasing proportion of that funding that's available. There is a limited amount of funding. The best thing we can do is have a well-aligned activity plan with an asset management plan to be aligned with Waka Kotahi's principles, but also to align it with the principles of the GPS. If we do that, and they told us that was a significant part of us lifting the bar last time. So this resilience piece in this activity plan, I think, will be key in us leveraging a bit more.
So if we, sorry, and I won't hold up, just two more quick things. So if we were to say, like, I guess in the last 3 years, is there any money we may have missed out on? And it's not a criticism, just so I can understand it, of money that we could have put into resurfacing and the likes?
I don't believe there is, no.
So I guess what I'm trying to get to is if we increase capacity, could we get access to more money for resurfacing at a 50-50 rate?
Yes, but we have to anticipate that it won't be the whole program at 50-50 because the government is tapped out.
Yeah, okay.
So there is a limited amount that they can dish out, but we may get more.
So I'd be really keen to see that when
we can make sure that's brought
and
through.
the only other one's really quickly, just the mandatory levels, just from my understanding. So there's 5 of them. DIA sets 1. Who sets the other 4?
No, DIA sets all of them.
They set all.
They're all DIA.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, just quickly, 28% increase this year. Do we have an idea, or do you have can we have a kind of an estimate from your team with regards to, say, the next couple of years? And also, what was the increase in the last 2 years? Because if we're looking at 28% over a long-term plan, 10 years, it's 280% increase.
Yeah.
But we obviously won't be keeping up with that. So sooner or later, we're going to fall over.
Yes, we'll do that work with the finance team to look at. They're looking at all of the indices. I mean,
because it's just
not here at the moment, but
I don't want us to believe that we can set unreasonable and unachievable levels for you, because we've been talking about satisfaction levels. There's no way we'll get in front of that if we're not being realistic from the start.
Yes, exactly. We want to provide you with options that, one, we can deliver, because we're setting an expectation with the community, and 2, isn't putting too much pressure on the organisation. So we get it, and we're not necessarily thinking that that's the inflation increase that we're going to have to see. I anticipate that there'll be a bit of a bow wave and then it'll flatten out again, but I'll have to take finance advice on that.
Well, let's hope so. Just the other one, a couple of things. Do we have to take, I guess, is there a road design that would be better for the city overall with regards to maintenance than there is currently being delivered by developers? I mean, do we have to accept, or do we have a say in what is built, etc.?
By developers?
Yeah, I know we have to approve it through the RMA or that process, but I'm just wondering, is there a better way that we can do it, or say no to a subdivision, say we would prefer it to be a private lane?
I'll have to take that one offline.
Yeah. So I suppose it's a bigger question.
Yeah,
but
so I'll take that one offline. I'll have to talk to Paul, John, and Paul and understand.
Yep.
John, Paul, and Ringo.
And Ringo, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've got some ideas, Tim.
Oh.
Who did?
Oh. Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're
I'll
done,
have to come
mate?
back on
Yeah.
that.
Victoria and then Sarah.
Kia ora. Thank you, Lynette. I appreciate there's an awful lot going on with your team. You've told us about your priorities and a lot about the challenges that we've got. Like Sam, I'm really interested in the how are we going to deliver, how are we going to shift that dial. And it occurs to me that we need to be having conversations, or perhaps some direction from the table around priorities. And I wonder whether you've got any initial comments on that for us in terms of where you think the reprioritisation needs to be, given we talked about the increasing costs, increasing demand for service, increasing length in our network, and the funding challenges that we have. Any initial comments on priorities?
Well, from our point of view, number one priority is looking after what we've got. And I think that's a really big, building that program and giving you some options around that. That will, if you take that as the basis of the start of the discussion, that will tell you how much is left over and what we can deliver. Because I do think that 100 odd million of operational money and about 135 million of capital is about our delivery cap and the market's cap at the moment. If we can keep that moving and rolling instead of spiking like it has been. So that certainty helps that. So providing clear decisions is a real priority for us. So having a good plan and sticking to it. But I think this resilience piece is also the other one. That's the one for us.
So if we were to tip this question on its head, what's got to give? Something's got to give. What's going to give?
I'm not sure at the moment what's going to give in it, but that's where we're going to have some robust conversations through the program. And it may be that we can do a little bit of a lot and keep making a difference. Because if we look forward at what we're seeing out of government around the climate change initiatives, and they're the ones that are going to be the hard to stick on. And if we can leverage government initiatives for those, then that will help us.
I think I'd like to add to that, if you don't mind.
Pardon?
I'd like to add to that that Lynette has just described in terms of your question, what's going to give. If the financial pressures in terms of what we can purchase costs us more year on year significantly, but it won't be to the levels that we're seeing at the moment, Tim, because it will come down a little bit, then ultimately the expectations both in this room and outside are going to have to be either reset or we're going to have to significantly put more money in, because it won't, the elastic band now is stretched so far it can't go any further.
No.
So that reality check, I think those numbers of the 45,000 to 60,000 calls coming in, yet the reverse of that is 8,000 of our potholes are done before a phone is picked up, so people aren't complaining. We're getting the 2,000 calls. So how do we actually change the conversation with the public about the state and nature of what is required here, and for them to be able to think they're getting good value for money as well? So that's the real dilemma we're facing in terms of the asset base for transport.
Thank you. Just two other questions. Picking up on the comments around uncertainty of funding, is from central government, is there anything you think that we should be perhaps considering to put on hold until we can get greater certainty around some funding, and particularly from central government? Is there any, is there anything that's low hanging fruit or something that we could perhaps put on hold if you think that there's a threat of funding being reduced?
The comment wasn't so much around certainty of funding. The comment was around certainty of program. So because of government initiatives, we have a shifting program, and that provides uncertainty for our communities. So those are more like the surf initiatives, the Streets for People initiatives. Right back at the start of the LTP, we had another one that I can't remember the name of that completely upended our transport capital program.
I think the point is that if there's uncertainty with the program, then there's what follows on from that is an uncertainty of funding. So is there anything in our current programs that we could consider putting on hold whilst we get some greater certainty around what the programs and consequently the funding will be?
My observation of the certainty of funding is that is improving, because the Waka Kotahi are following consistent processes. It's out of alignment with our long-term plan processes, but that's what it is. We know when it's coming. They have been consistent eventually through the last couple of years. They have been clear about what the big improvement projects are likely to get funded and which are not. So I don't see certainty of funding via the Waka Kotahi stream as an issue. These are other national initiatives that cause this disruption. So I think we need to set up our program, be clear about what we believe we're going to get funding for and what we're not, and set up a program that can be a little bit nimble, so that if initiatives that you want to take advantage of come along, we can do that without completely upending the program. And I think part of that starts with being really clear about that base of asset renewals and what that looks like and how we do that.
Thank you. Interested to know, given the increasing pressures and challenges with staffing levels, where are you at with current staffing, and can we expect to see a request for increased funding to increase resourcing for staffing?
I'm not anticipating that, but I haven't.
Okay. And the final point then is around certainty in our budget setting. That we're constantly getting increase with cost blowouts on various transport projects, and I appreciate that a lot of that comes from external forces. Is there anything that you're doing within your team to give us greater certainty around the budgets and the cost setting that you are coming to us with?
So that's the very conversation that we're having with finance and the program management team around how do we set our budgets, how do we look at them realistically, what are the cost pressures that we're facing, and how do we provide the best information we can to you through this process. Yeah. Okay. And through the chair, sorry, just to touch back on resources, we are facing, like everyone is in the organisation and the industry, difficulty in filling positions. So that is an ongoing challenge that we have, which affects our deliverability, but is not. Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, please.
Thank you. Just going back to some of the stuff Sam was talking about roadway condition, so that we can increase resident satisfaction, and then footpaths. So the level of service 16.0.1, which is the maintaining roadway condition that's set by DIA, the last two LTPs I've been involved in, both times we've kind of looked at this and gone, right, we need to increase that, and both times we've put on additional budget that would take us to 5 to 6% renewal.
Yep.
Based on advice, and neither of those times that has ended up playing out to actually get that percentage of renewal. And I'm just wondering what we've learned from that about how we go about that process so that we can get to 5 to 6% through this process this time, because only doing 3 or 2.5% is not going to get us there.
No, it's not. You're correct. We are doing a good hard look at what we said and how we calculated things. We've had a significant number of staff changes since the last time we did this, but it is definitely a question that is being undertaken around the office at the moment. We are working through that, and part of this, in a broad sense, the issue was that we were putting the money on budget for resurfacing, but we weren't putting the money on the OPEX budget to undertake the pre-seal repairs that at the time needed to be OPEX money. That's changed. We've changed that.
Yeah.
So we didn't fund the repairs needed to undertake the road resurface in the right way, to do it once and do it right. We are now trying to do it once, do it right, so that whole picture will come to you. We will give you not just the picture of the chip seal and asphalt, but also the rehab and the pre-seal repair costs, and how we need to structure that budget in a better way so that we move and get to that 5% or more, if that's what your choice is.
Yeah.
When we'll give you those options.
And as part of the information that comes to us, we have the information we've had in previous years about the number, the length of kilometres that are in the different grades, and at the end of the process, will we get that kind of map of where that stuff is that's planned to be done in the next 3 years? Because that was incredibly
yeah,
useful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're looking to
Many
keep
councils
that up.
won't have seen that. So
We're
yeah.
looking to keep that up as well, because that is something that information about what we're planning and what we're future planning is incredibly useful for the communities as well.
Yeah.
The condition assessment is something else. We are required because of these mandatory partly because of these mandatory levels of service, but also partly the requirements of Waka Kotahi. So I think it was back to what Councillor McDonald said earlier about how do we leverage the money as much as we can from the subsidy. We need to undertake the condition assessments. They're undertaken on the road every year. We need to do similar with the footpaths. So that's all got to be built into our operational budgets.
Yeah, that was my next question.
So we're going to try and because there's so much, it's a really big, they're both really big, really complicated budgets. We're just trying to focus on those and show you those pictures really, really well so we can see that, and then we can start the next part of the question.
Okay.
Okay.
So just with the footpaths, so the LOS is 80% at 82% at grades 1, 2, 3, and it's satisfaction with condition. I'm just wondering whether there was something about, because we've got respond to customer service requests within appropriate timeframes. For me, the key ones are around those kind of trip hazards and stuff. And do we manage to prioritise those through the system?
They're prioritised through contractual levels of service that we have with our contractors. If it comes in and a call comes into our contractors, so the best thing everyone can do is if you have or see a trip hazard on the footpath, our contractors won't always see it the same day that you have. Call it through to the call centre and tell them there's a trip hazard, or you tripped on a route, or an extrusion from the footpath, whatever. The best thing you can do is call that through and say that happened.
Yeah.
The call centre will automatically classify it as a hazard.
Yeah.
And and they've got a 24-hour response time on that. Now, like footpaths, many of these things are being like potholes, many of these things are being fixed because our contractors are finding them anyway. But don't assume our contractors are finding them. The best thing you can do in the part of the community that we live in is, and be part of that community, is to call it in to the call centre, and they log it directly with our contractors.
Great.
They could log it directly with their councillors, but I don't. That would work.
So just the last thing was on that communications piece, and I think you're right. It's that how we communicate what we're doing is really important. I know that in the past we used to, like with the old ITE committee, there used to be the bi-monthly reporting on actually the work program that was coming up for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if that's kind of the thing that we look at reinstating, so that actually people get an overview of.
That'll be reinstated well before this LTP gets finalised.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Lynette's been asked to do that.
Yeah, we're getting on with it.
Okay. So what we have at the moment is time is up. We've got Tyrone, Kelly, Pauline and Yanni who are going to have to put their questions through to the OCE so that they can end up with you, because we have got Takaha design update coming to us in about 30 seconds. So
lovely.
Thank you very much,
everybody.
Lynette, you're not Pauline.
We need to talk about Banks Peninsula.